There was a smell of burnt plastic and something sour, as if someone had forgotten to turn off the kettle in an empty apartment. The smell came from the elevator, even though the light above the button was not on, and the cabin was standing still. A woman holding a bag of groceries stopped, sensing that the air was vibrating, as if the elevator was running silently. She walked past, but noticed something strange on the landing. Under her doormat lay a strange key with a red tag on which her name was neatly written. Hello, friends. Your storyteller here. Write in the comments where you are watching this episode from, and tell us if you have ever encountered things that seem to know you better than you know yourself. Make yourselves comfortable. The story you are about to hear began with an ordinary advertisement. She was looking for a place to live in a hurry. Her old room was going to be rented out to someone else, and her landlady gave her a week's notice. Her salary at the sales office was delayed, and she didn't have any extra money for a new lease. She scrolled through websites at night, filtering for low price, until she came across one ad. A clean room in the center, windows facing the courtyard, new furniture, the price, almost half the market rate. Under the photo was a note. Urgent rental, only for one woman, no intermediaries. The description was straightforward but well written, with no mistakes. For some reason, it inspired confidence. She wrote a message and received a reply almost immediately. Short, polite, without a name. She was invited to come tomorrow evening after 6. The house turned out to be old, with peeling tiles at the entrance. The stairwell smelled of dampness and paint. Someone had recently filled the cracks in the walls. The room looked exactly like the photo. White walls, a bed, a table, even curtains with the same pattern. She asked about the contract, and the landlord replied that all the documents could be completed through the website. She believed him. Many people do it that way now. In the evening, when she got home, she received a notification in her email. Thank you for your confirmation. Your stay has begun. Below was her name and the same address. She thought it was just an automatic error because she hadn't signed anything. She tried to delete the message but couldn't. The delete button didn't respond. In her personal account on the website, the ads section disappeared, and the landlord's profile became unavailable. At first, she decided not to worry about it. She had to go to work in the morning, and it all seemed trivial. But that same day, strange things began to happen. In the mailbox where her documents were kept, copies of her diploma, passport, there was only an empty envelope. None of the papers had ever disappeared before, and she was the only one with a key to the box. The building manager said that someone had been seen checking the mail at night, but he couldn't describe them because the lights in the hallways had been turned off. At work, the secretary told her that her resignation letter had already been processed by the HR department. The date was yesterday. The signature was hers. She tried to explain that it was a mistake, but the accountant showed her a printout of the letter sent from her personal email. It did indeed contain a request to free up a position due to relocation. She felt cold. Her phone was filled with dozens of notifications from banks, stores, and mailing lists. Congratulations on your new address. Everywhere she looked, there was that same house she had viewed. The first coincidences could have been attributed to a technical glitch, if not for the small details. Every evening she noticed that the light bulb by the door was flickering, as if someone was flipping the switch from inside. The lock was slightly turned, as if someone had recently inserted a key. And there was always dust under the doormat, even though she had cleaned it that morning. Once, when she came home late, she saw the numbers reflected in the intercom, the number of the apartment where she was renting a room. But she didn't dial the code. The intercom turned on by itself. She called the number listed in the ad, but instead of a ring, she heard silence and then her own voice. The same tone, the same intonation, as if it were a recording. "You're home now." After that, the sound cut off. She decided to check who lived in that apartment. The ad was no longer on the website, but a copy of the page was saved in the search engine cache. The photo showed the same room, only now a woman in a white sweater was reflected in the window, standing with a phone in her hand. Her face was indistinct, but the silhouette resembled her. From that moment on, she couldn't sleep. She began to keep notes. What time the light flashed. How many times the elevator stopped on her floor, even though no one got out. Every evening, exactly 3 stops in a row, and the number of the apartment where she lived lit up on the panel. A few days later, a utility bill arrived at her new address. Her name was listed as the tenant. The postmark was real, from the city. She brought the paper to the website's support service. They couldn't find her profile or the ad itself. The employee said that the page might have been deleted due to a complaint, but there was no information about the tenant in the database. When the woman tried to show the bill, the employee's computer screen flashed and froze. The employee, smiling nervously, suggested leaving a request for verification. At home, exhausted, she turned on her laptop and decided to visit the website again. But the page would not open. Instead of the logo, a line appeared. User authorized. Below this inscription was a list of tenants. Her name was first. Second was a blank line. She remembered that the owner of her old room had once told her about a friend who disappeared after being photographed for an apartment catalog. At the time, it sounded like a rumor. The photographer allegedly saved all the shots and then posted them on websites with fake offers. The girls flashed in the reflections in the photos as a guarantee of authenticity. Now this story seemed disturbing. At the bottom of the desk drawer, she found a printout of the contract for the previous apartment. Under the landlord's signature was the name of a man who matched the nickname of the author of the new ad. At the time, she didn't pay any attention to it, thinking it was an assistant or an agent. Now she understood. The old contract connected them. Perhaps that was why the ad found her. On the third night after the call, she noticed that the elevator had turned on by itself. The numbers on the display counted down the floors. The elevator stopped at her floor, and the doors opened. Inside, it was empty, but on the floor lay the very same key with the red tag. She picked it up and felt that the metal was warm, as if someone had just been holding it. Deciding that was enough, she went down to the basement, where the building's communications hub was located. Two green lights were burning in the darkness, the server and the router. A sign with an address hung on the cover. It was the same address as in the start of residence notification. Someone had written her last name on the wall in chalk. At that moment, the elevator started working. Through the bars, she saw the cabin rising again, even though no one had called it. She didn't run. She just stood there until the elevator slowly stopped at the right floor. For a second, a light flashed, and the door began to open. Behind it was her own room, the one she had left a week ago. The bed, the curtain, even the cup she had left behind. Only on the wall hung a new sign that read, "Rented." She took a step forward and felt the air become thick, like water. The door slammed shut. The elevator went down. The next day, the building manager told the neighbors that a new tenant had moved in. He said she was quiet, neat, and had recently moved in. No one had seen her bring her belongings in, but the light in her window was on every night. Those who passed by the door noticed warm air coming from under the threshold, as if a heater were running inside. Sometimes a key with a red tag is found under the doormat. A name is engraved on it, and every time, it's a new one. In the morning, the neighbors heard the quiet hum of the elevator, even though the daytime lighting in the building had not yet been turned on. The elevator stopped on every floor. The doors opened and closed, as if someone invisible was checking that everything was in place. The building manager, passing by with his keys, noticed someone's shadow in the elevator mirror, but there was no one in the elevator. He wrote it down in the log, but later the page with the entry disappeared. Meanwhile, in the woman's old apartment, the landlady finally returned from her trip. She had called her former tenant several times to return the deposit, but there was no answer. So she came in person. The apartment looked strange, clean, but as if no one lived there. There was a cup with a dried tea ring on the windowsill. On the table was a printout of a receipt with a new address. The landlady did not remember leaving such papers. There was a fresh mark of tape on the door, as if someone had recently stuck a piece of paper there. When she opened the mailbox, a key card with a red stripe and the former tenant's surname fell out. She didn't tell her neighbors. She simply put a lock on the door and decided to call a cleaner to rent out the room again. But the next day, the ad appeared on its own. Same platform, same text, only the photos were slightly different. The curtains were slightly open. There was a different cup on the table. And in the reflection of the window, a person in a white sweater was leaning over a laptop. At that time, another person in the city, a man in his 40s, a delivery driver, was leafing through the ads. After his divorce, he rented a small room in a residential area, but the landlady decided to raise the rent. He was looking for something closer to work. In the new section, there was an attractive offer. A room in the center, inexpensive, for a neat tenant. The photos looked like they were from a catalog. Light walls, a mirror, a bed, and everything looked cozy. He noticed a small detail. In one photo, there was a woman's bag on the nightstand. He decided that the photo had been taken a long time ago, but the ad was still valid since the publication date was yesterday. He wrote to the landlord and received an instant reply. Viewing is possible today after 6. He was alarmed that the person he was talking to did not give his name, but he went anyway. The price was too good. The building was old, with peeling railings, but the entrance was clean. He went up to the 4th floor and rang the bell. The door opened silently. Inside was an empty room with only the light from the hallway bulb reflected in the mirror. There was a folder with papers on the table. In it, he saw an old rental agreement. The name in the tenant column was a woman's, but the handwriting at the bottom was remarkably similar to his own. He put the folder back and left, deciding it wasn't worth getting involved. But when he got home, there was already a notification on his phone. "Thank you for confirming. Your stay has begun." At first, he thought it was spam, but there was no delete button on the website. When he tried calling the number, a quiet voice came through the receiver. An exact copy of his own, only slightly quieter, as if recorded on a dictaphone. The voice said, "You are already home." A day later, he received a letter from the bank with a changed address. He went to the branch, but they said that the change had been made based on a statement signed by him. The signature matched. At home, he started looking for the documents. Half of them were missing. In the evening, on his way home from work, he noticed that the intercom in his building showed the number of the very house he had been viewing. He pressed the button, and the door opened. He went inside and saw that the stairwells were identical in every detail, even though the building was in a different neighborhood. Even the crack in the wall by the mailboxes was in the same place. On the 3rd floor, there was a room with a rented sign. A key with a red tag was sticking out of the keyhole. He turned it, and the door opened to reveal a room that matched the photo in the ad exactly. Only there was a mirror on the wall, and in its reflection, he saw a woman with short hair. She stood motionless, staring straight at him. The light flickered, and the reflection disappeared. He jumped onto the stairs and ran down, but the elevator doors were already opening. Warm air was coming out of the cabin. Inside was a bag, just like the one in the photo. He bent down. Inside was a woman's passport with a photo where she looked like the reflection in the mirror. The name matched the one on the old lease agreement. He went to the website's support service. They told him that his profile was indeed active, but it was linked to an address that was not in the database. The employee tried to open the page, but the screen flashed and the message changed to "User authorized." She froze, staring at the monitor, then quietly said that the system would not accept her password. Later, at home, he turned on his laptop and noticed that a new untitled file had appeared on the desktop. It contained only one line: "Do not leave the room during the update." He didn't have time to figure out what it meant before the elevator behind the wall started moving again. The numbers on the panel slowly counted down the floors. He didn't sleep that night. He sat listening to the hum of the elevator in the stairwell and tried to remember if he had heard something similar before. And then he remembered. A few years ago, he had worked as a courier and often delivered parcels to old houses. At that time, there was a story about a programmer who had created a rental platform where each submitted address copied the tenant's data. After the developer disappeared, the site began to update itself, substituting new ads based on the profiles it found. He decided to check. His old phone with email notifications was lying in a drawer. He typed the house number into the search bar. He found an archived ad, the same address, the same text. Only his former tenant was listed as the renter. The photos loaded slowly. In one, he saw himself, reflected in the window, standing at the door a few days ago. Now he understood. The room chooses its tenants itself. Each new ad is based on data from the previous tenant. That night, he noticed that the intercom camera was flashing, even when the lights were off. His silhouette was reflected in the glass, but slightly offset, as if someone were repeating his movements with a slight delay. He tried to cover the lens, but the light from inside still shone through. When he woke up in the morning, there was a letter in the mailbox. Confirmed. Checkout complete. Thank you for staying with us. He didn't know what it meant until he looked out the window. On the windowsill was a cup with a tea ring. The very same one that had been in the woman's old apartment. A few days passed. A new offer appeared in the classified section. A room in the center, clean, inexpensive. The photos were updated. Now a man was sitting at the table, looking at a laptop screen. His face was blurred, but his figure was recognizable. Neighbors say that at night, the sound of a keyboard can be heard on the fourth floor. Sometimes there is a quiet hum in the elevator, like breathing. And now they find a key with a red tag under the doormat. Not one name is engraved on it, but two, side by side, as if someone tried to erase one and write another. But that's not the end of it. There is one detail left in the house that no one notices. The surveillance camera in the elevator is still flashing, even when the electricity in the building is turned off. No one watches the recordings. They are automatically uploaded to the same website, where a new ad appears every night. And each one begins the same way. Room for rent, for one person only, no middlemen. A week later, rumors began to circulate about the building. Some claimed to have heard the elevator running by itself at night. Others said that names of people no one knew began to appear on the mailboxes. The building manager tried to erase them, but the next morning, the inscriptions reappeared. The letters were imprinted on the gray metal as if they had been burned from the inside. One resident stood out among the others, a young electrician named Semyon, who had recently moved into the neighboring building. He was hired to check the wiring because the building was constantly pulsing. The lights flickered, the doorbells rang without being pressed, and even the meters showed different voltages. Semyon didn't believe in strange phenomena. He just did his job, took readings, checked the circuit breakers. But on the very first day, he noticed that the elevator was connected to a separate line that was not laid out according to the diagram. The cable went into the wall and disappeared somewhere under the old garbage chute. He asked the building manager who maintained this system. The manager hesitated and said that the elevator had been installed under the old housing office and there were no documents. Then Semyon decided to go down to the basement. There he found a panel with the inscription, "Facility Server," although ordinary houses did not have such a thing. The LEDs flashed as if someone was updating the data in real time. Lines flashed on the screen. Residence confirmed, profile update. He tried to turn off the power, but the buttons did not respond. A message appeared on the panel. Access only for registered residents. Below the line was a surname that matched the one he had seen in the residence log a week ago, and next to it was the addition, active. Semyon was not easily impressed, but that night changed his attitude. Returning home, he noticed an envelope with no return address under his door. Inside was a copy of an employment contract for the position of maintenance engineer for building number, and a signature that looked remarkably like his own. He decided it was someone's joke, but in the morning, his boss called and asked if he was planning to leave, saying that a transfer notice had arrived. Semyon logged into his personal account on the company's website, and sure enough, under place of work, there was a new address. The very building where he had been checking the wiring yesterday. He began to look for an explanation. He compared documents and checked file metadata, but everything looked genuine. Even the creation date matched the time he was in the basement. On the third day, he received a call from a woman who introduced herself as being from home support. Her voice was calm, but strangely familiar, as if it slightly echoed his own tone. She informed him that his contract had been activated and access to the system had been confirmed. He wanted to ask what system she was referring to, but the connection was lost. While checking the elevator, he noticed a micro camera hidden in the call panel. Its recording indicator was glowing red. The elevator seemed to have a life of its own. It was called and moved without anyone pressing the buttons. Semyon installed a blocker to cut off the power to the cabin at night. But when he came to check in the morning, the blocker was still in place, and the elevator was still working. He went down to the basement and saw that the server was overloaded. A new line appeared on the monitor. New technician assigned. Accommodation confirmed. Semyon stepped back. His name flashed on the screen. He realized that the house itself was adding people to its lists. It was as if every attempt to interfere was perceived by the system as a signal to register a new resident. Then he decided to find the root cause, who had installed this server. Using the serial number, he tracked down the old smart home system developer, which had long since gone bankrupt. In the open archives, he found a mention of the module housing project, an experiment where the house was supposed to automatically select residents based on matching parameters. But there was only one programmer among the employees who had disappeared several years ago. His name matched the signature on an old contract found in that woman's room. Semyon gathered everything he could: copies of receipts, update logs, screenshots. He decided to show them to a journalist he knew so that he could investigate. But when he arrived at the meeting, the journalist did not show up. Instead, a phone rang in the cafe. The number on the screen was that of the very same house. He didn't answer, but the call didn't stop. Then he picked up the phone and a voice in the speaker said, "Data accepted." Thank you for your cooperation. When he got home, he noticed that some of his photos were missing, and a folder named New Residents was open on his laptop. Inside were hundreds of images of rooms, people, and reflections in mirrors. In one photo, he was standing in the basement in front of the server. That night, he decided to destroy the equipment. He took his tools and a flashlight and went downstairs. The cable going into the wall led to a metal cabinet. When he opened it, he saw a power supply inside, connected to dozens of thin wires going up to the apartments. A diagram with labels hung on the wall. Each apartment was marked with the name of the tenant. The last line was blank. He cut the main wire. The lights flickered, and the server went dark. At that moment, the building fell silent. The elevator stopped. The lights dimmed. It seemed like it was all over. But then the monitor lit up again. The screen flashed, and a message appeared. Backup power mode activated. Thank you for the update. The label, Permanent Access, lit up on the screen next to his name. He realized that now the house had added him permanently. No one has seen Semyon since. His tools remained in the basement, neatly stacked as if after work. A few days later, a new ad appeared on the website. Room for rent for one person. Discount available for electronics specialists. The photos were the same, only now there was a shadow of a man with a flashlight on the wall. The neighbors got used to the sounds of the elevator at night. They say the building has finally become quieter, as if satisfied. But those who live nearby sometimes notice a strange pattern. Every week, the same key with a red tag appears in the mailboxes, and a new name is engraved on it. Some say it's just a prank. Others say that the building is really being renovated. After all, if you approach the panel in the basement, you can see not only numbers and codes in the screen's reflection, but also the faces of those who look too closely. They appear for a split second, and then disappear, as if someone has already added them to the list of residents. And the website is still active. Once a day, a new ad appears on it, each with a different story, but with the same beginning. Room for rent, for one person only, no middlemen. And everyone who opens the page sees a small inscription under the photo. You are already home. At night, the city hummed as usual. Trams, occasional sirens, doors clicking in the stairwells. Only one building remained completely dark. No one opened the windows there anymore, and the elevator seemed to have stopped forever. But that was only on the outside. Inside, the basement panels glowed with steady light, and under the inscription Active Residents, the line slowly filled with new names. A couple of weeks later, the building was listed as emergency. They planned to cut off the electricity. A city inspector was called in. A man in his 50s, looking tired but attentive. His name was Lavrentiev. He was one of those people who was used to checking everything personally and didn't believe in rumors. In his youth, he worked as an electrician, then became a building safety engineer. The irony was that he had once participated in the installation of the first smart home systems, including the experimental project that was later shut down. When Lavrentiev heard the address, it struck him. The number was all too familiar. He dug into the old archives at work and indeed found the installation report, signed by the name of a programmer who was once the subject of legends. He himself had participated in the project as a consultant. The house was supposed to adapt to its residents, select conditions, learn habits, and save resources. But the experiment was shut down after a failure. The server stopped accepting commands and began duplicating residents' profiles, creating backup copies of them. There was no data on the system shutdown. Lavrentiev decided to go there himself, even though he was not told to. The house was dead, but when he approached, the motion sensor on the door flashed, as if it recognized him. Inside, it smelled of metal and dust. He went down to the basement and immediately noticed that the equipment was still working. The screen was flashing, and the lists were updating. The purpose column contained the phrases electrician, housing confirmed, system support. At the bottom was a line with no name, but with the status waiting for operator. He realized that the system was waiting for him. Lavrentiev plugged in his old laptop and entered the emergency code he remembered by heart. The screen flashed, and a message appeared. "Hello, Konstantin. You're back." He held his breath. The system knew his name, even though the code did not contain any user data. He continued. He opened the update logs. The last entry was dated just an hour ago. Semyon, permanent access mode activated. He realized that the house didn't just store profiles, it created a chain. Every new person who touched the system automatically became part of its memory. He paused and typed the command: delete all users. The response came instantly. Insufficient privileges. Add user to administrator's list. Lavrentiev hesitated, but entered the confirmation. The screen went blank for a few seconds. Then a new window appeared. Administrator confirmed. His name appeared below the line. At that moment, a slight hum passed through the house, like electricity through arteries. He heard something moving in the elevator. Mechanisms, cables, buttons clicking. A new entry appeared on the panel. Reconnection activated. Occupancy. Administrator. He realized that he had just let the system inside himself. It became difficult for him to breathe. One of the photos on the monitor changed. Now it showed his own figure standing in the basement. Under the image was the caption, "Active." But at that very moment, something happened that no one expected. Another voice came from the speaker built into the wall, a woman's voice, quiet, as if filtered. She said, "Now you can finish." Lavrentiev froze. The voice sounded familiar. He remembered it was his daughter. Several years ago, she had worked at the very company that created the system and had died in a laboratory fire. He thought her data had been lost, but the house spoke in her tone of voice. "Dad, don't be afraid. Just turn off the power." He realized that the system stored not only the residents, but also fragments of the personalities of those who built it. It didn't kill. It copied. He went to the panel and opened the cover. The cables hummed as if they were alive. One of them was thicker than the others, warm, as if it were breathing. He took a pair of wire cutters and cut the wire. At that moment, the screen flashed, displaying the message, "Deletion mode activated. All users will be released." The building shook, the elevator stopped, and the lights flickered. A light flashed in the windows, short flashes, as if someone were lighting candles from inside. The basement smelled of ozone. After a few seconds, everything calmed down. When the workers came to turn off the electricity in the morning, they found the equipment de-energized and the panels empty. One line remained frozen on the monitor. "System complete. Thank you for staying." The administrator's name had disappeared. Only on the screen, in the very corner, remained a short note. "Lavrentiev. Transmitted." A month later, the house was demolished. A residential complex was built in its place. But the residents of the new building say that sometimes at night, when the lights go out, the old inscription flashes in the elevator. "Room for rent, for one person only, no middlemen." Those who stand in front of the door for a long time swear that they hear a quiet voice, tired even, without threat, almost friendly. It says, "Now you are home, and nothing threatens you here." That was the end of the cycle, but not the end of the story. Because a new announcement suddenly appeared on one of the city platforms. The same description, but with a small note, ad posted by the administration, verified manually. Under the photo of the room was the caption, "Added by L." And just below that, there is a barely noticeable note, as if for those who can read code, "System complete, surveillance mode activated." Now the house no longer chooses anyone. It just watches. This concludes the story about the advertisement that cannot be deleted. But if you ever see a familiar room in your website feed and notice a strange caption under the photo that says, "Verified manually," just don't click on it. Because in some houses, the memory of those who once clicked "Confirm Residence" still remains.